Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to episode 23 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast with me, Rory Lees-Oakes. And with me today is the Scarlet Pimpernel. We seek him here, we seek him there. We seek Ken Kelly everywhere. He's got a red T-shirt on and I can see him. How are you, Ken?
I'm very well. I'm feeling very Pimpernelish.
You will. He was a good guy. He saved people during the French Revolution. He was a good guy.
Good. Well, that's all right. Then I feel a little bit better. I'm excited for today. We've got an action-packed episode. Is episode 23. We're going to be kicking off and we're going to be speaking about something that is so important, and that is lone working on your own, and what you should be considering around that. And then theory with Rory is a real interesting one as well, because you're going to be speaking about stereotypes, Rory.
I am. I'm going to be talking about the theory of stereotypes and looking at a couple of ideas. And I'm also going to be saying, and this might sound a bit of a shock, why sometimes stereotyping can be quite useful to us.
Oh, so there's a hook. There's a hook. Everyone's now on the edge of the seats wanting that to come. A person-centered business. I'm going to be covering the use of brochures in private practice, or even if you're working within an agency, what a brochure should say, how to construct that. I'm actually going to be sharing some software where you can make one yourself pretty simply without having to go to a printer. And then we've got a great topic for debate and discussion to close off episode 23, and that is on how to reference when you are writing your assignments. We're going to be speaking about Harvard referencing, and we're going to be sharing a free Harvard referencing tool that you can actually use when you come to your next assignment, and because I know that it always causes a hassle, the old referencing.
Oh, it does, Ken. It does. And I know I've had many discussions with students over the years about referencing, and we're going to make that easy for you because it's kind of what we do in Counselling Tutor. Indeed it is.
So kicking off with lone working, Rory, start us off with that.
Yeah, I'm going to start you off. I'm going to take you back to the 1980s, the heady 1980s, where everybody was wearing shoulder pads and listening to Duran Duran, for those of us who can remember that. And I want to tell you a little story about Susie Lamplugh. Susie Lamplugh was a London-based estate agent who one day went out to show a house to a man called Mr. Kipper and never returned. And she's never been found since. And when the police investigated it, they discovered that not only did the estate agents have a very, very vague idea of where she was, they had no idea of who she was meeting. And what was even worse was no one realised she was gone until a couple of days later. And they've never found her. To this day, they've never found Susie Lamplugh. And her mother set up the Susie Lamplugh Trust. And I'd done their training. I did the training when I was a support worker, working in the field. I worked in mental health, so I supported people in their own homes who'd come out of, maybe come off the ward. And I also worked in the community with ex-offenders, people who'd come out of prison and were resettling. And part of that training was to do lone working. And it's just so important. And what I would say is walk down your street and it looks like a really safe place. And I don't want to frighten people, but actually, people can disappear off the street. And if you're working, maybe your agency encourages people to, or you as a student, to visit clients in their own homes, and that's a great thing. Some clients can't get out and they need support too, but really any agency should have a lone working policy, and we're going to be talking about that. And maybe I'll share a couple of observations of my time as a support worker. But it's essential lone working, isn't it, Ken?
Very much so. Very much so. And you're saying how you walk down your own street and you see it as a safe place, because that's our frame of reference, because we can only see it from our experiences. And it was just really interesting. My daughter wanted to go somewhere yesterday. We found ourselves on the internet Googling how many children are reported lost in the UK. And I wanted to say each year, but the interesting thing is every 3 minutes a child is reported lost. There is a report that goes in. That doesn't mean one goes lost every 3 minutes. It means that's the reports that are going in. So it just shows that lone working is something you need to consider. If you're working in an agency, you shouldn't be working alone. And if you are working alone, you should have policies and procedures that are there to protect you.
Absolutely, Ken. So I'm going to give you a few tips that I picked up from my training, and one of them was from watching the film Apollo 13. For those of you who don't remember what Apollo 13 is, it was a failed moon landing. They got kind of halfway to the moon and part of their spaceship blew up, and there they were, literally lost in space. And remarkably, they managed to get all the astronauts home safe and well. And the reason they did that was because they had a plan. They had a plan, and they had everything mapped out for every eventuality. And that is what you have to do when you're lone working. So here's my top tips. First of all, if you are lone working, what you need to do is you need to actually have a system where people will know if you never return. Now, one of the great systems that I used when I loan worked was an envelope. I'd put the client's name and address and details in the envelope. I'd seal the envelope up, and I would leave it on my keyboard on my desk at home. And if I didn't come back, my wife would open it. If I didn't come back, say, at all, my wife would open it, and at least the police would have a last location. Now, I know that some of you are going to think, well, what about client confidentiality? Well, what I would say is, what about my life?
Harm to self, harm to others comes very highly, and that is harm to very much self, isn't it?
Yeah. And also, and what I would say also is that, if you don't come back at all, then it's pretty serious. There are some things that trump confidence, and your client might have been the last person to actually see you alive. Well, it would have been the person who might have done harm to you that could have seen you alive, but they need to find you. So it's really good, and it's really good for teenagers when they want a bit of independence. Just put the name of where you're going in the envelope. And if you come back, we'll give you the envelope back. So that's a good tip. The other is to make sure you've got some kind of communication, and that could be a mobile phone. Usually now people carry them, but don't be lulled into a false sense of security with a mobile phone. Try this experiment with a peer at college if you're lone working. It's a real eye-opener. Get your mobile phone out, okay, as you would draw it out of your pocket, and then get your peer to stand a few feet away with their index finger pointed out, and then get them to run at you and poke you gently. See how quick you can dial the police while they're poking you.
Yeah.
And a lot of people believe that having a mobile phone is the ultimate protection. In fact, looking at a mobile phone stops you being spatially aware. It stops you looking left and right, back and front, and listening, because you're so busy looking at that. And lots of people are mugged in the street because they're so focused on their mobile phones that they don't see anybody else. So be thoughtful of that. And also speak with your agency. What is their policy? Did they have a check-in and check-out? When I was a senior support worker, all my staff that I work with would text me with a code saying home. Yeah, not just home, because if someone got hold of their mobile phone and looked down the text, they could realise that, that was what was done every night. But they'd text me we'd have a password of the day, and they'd send me the password of the day. What I would say is that I worked for a charity where we, as I say, supported ex-offenders, and they were never a problem. I never had any problem with anybody I supported. However, some of the general public we came to meet sometimes could be quite difficult. And I can remember one of my staff who just wasn't answering the phone, and I went round to where they were working. They were clearing out the back of a house in Gorton. And I said, you've not contacted me? And she said, oh, it's all right, she said. I said, how many people have you seen walking past in the last 2 hours? Well, nobody. I said, well, you could be lying there and no one would have seen you. So it's really, really important. If you are working for an agency who asks you to do home visits, then they really, really do need some kind of lone working policy. And if you haven't got one and something happens to you, then I think both of you are going to be in trouble.
Agreed. And I'm going to look at this from a private practice perspective. So I work in private practice and I work from my home, and there are times that I will work where I am the only person in the home. And I still have to have a policy and a procedure in place. And my policy is that I have a contact person, in this case happens to be my wife, and I will send her just a text in between clients just to say hi. And she knows to expect the text in between clients. So if for any reason I don't send that text, there is reason for suspicion. And it's interesting, Rory, because just before, as we were getting the elastic bands ready for today's podcast, you noticed that I said, oh, hold on, I just need to acknowledge a text. And that text is because we have the similar policy with my wife. She was traveling somewhere and she will just send me a quick text to say, got here okay. And it's just that checking in. Somebody needs to know where you are, and you need to have some kind of a system in place to contact or touch base with somebody in between your clients, just to say that you're okay.
Absolutely. And please, if you're listening to this on iTunes, go over to our website, www.counsellingtutor.com. There's 2 L's in counselling. We spell it in the UK way, not the American way. Have a look at this particular episode. And in the show notes, I'll put a link to the Susie Lamplugh Trust. There is just a wealth of gold dust information on keeping yourself safe when you're out and about working.
Great link.
Even if you're not a counsellor, great resource.
Great resource, great link, and you'll get that on the show notes page for episode 23 on the Counselling Tutor podcast. So there you go. Have a think about loan working. Definitely consider it. If you're working in a placement in an agency, go and ask them. Go and say, what is your loan working policy? And speak to your peers about it. And of course, continue this conversation on the Facebook group. And that's easy to find. You go to Facebook and you put in Counselling Tutor, and there we are, right at the top. Knock on the door. We'll let you in. Come and join over 3,000 like-minded students of psychotherapy and counselling from around the world, and come and carry on this conversation. But it's now time to go into theory with Rory, and it's a really interesting topic. Before we go into this, you're going to be speaking about stereotypes, Rory. I remember during my counselling training learning about stereotypes, and I thought that I didn't think I held any stereotypes until I sat in your lesson, and I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I stereotype people. So I'm really excited about today's.
Yes, and I have to say, Ken, I don't want to rescue you here, but you wouldn't have been on your own. I've taught that lesson many years, and a lot of people go, oh, So, and I'll give you a bit of a clue how stereotyping can seep in. It can slide into people's practices. When a client comes along, and sometimes you hear it in supervision groups, and someone will say, oh, yes, well, I've got this client, and he or she is and put any minority in it, or anybody in, a woman, someone who's gay, someone who's disabled, someone who's pregnant, all the protected characteristics under the UK Equality Act. And they say it's no wonder they feel depressed. So what they do is they link their difference to what's wrong with them. And I used to say, no, it doesn't work that way. You cannot say that because someone is gay, that of course they'll be depressed. Why wouldn't they be depressed? And that's how easy it can be. And I've heard that more times than I'm comfortable to admit through the years, Ken. So we're going to look at stereotypes, but also we're going to look at why sometimes stereotyping can be useful to human beings. So I'm going to give you the other side of it as well.
So without any further ado, let's jump straight into Theory with Rory.
Counselling Theory with Rory Lees Oakes.
During the summer, my wife and I decided to visit one of our favourite tea rooms. Walking through the small town where we live, we came across a group of young people, all wearing hooded tops. My wife suggested that we cross the road, as she did not like the look of them. I insisted that we carry on, remarking that we live in a former mill town, not downtown Los Angeles. As we walked past the group, they politely stood to one side and we went on our way. Later, over tea and a slice of Victoria's sponge cake, I asked my wife why she was so wary of young people in hoods. She replied that in the past she'd encountered groups of hoodies who were not very nice. She worked in a shop that had been robbed by a group of hooded individuals. So the first lesson we learn about stereotyping is that our experience of past events can influence how we view future interactions. Stereotyping can also act as a defence mechanism to protect us. The second lesson is that we don't always need direct experience to stereotype. Remember my comments on downtown Los Angeles? I've never been there. My comments were driven, I suspect, by watching too many episodes of CSI, which brings us to the third lesson of stereotyping. The media can influence how we think.
In both cases, our predetermined views blinded us from actually seeing the people in question as individuals. The term stereotype was first coined in 1921 by the writer Walter Lippmann. He wrote a book entitled Public Opinion, describing how communication of ideas can affect our perception of people. The opening of the book describes this true story. There was an island in the ocean where in 1914 a handful of English, French and German people lived. The only communication was by a 3-monthly visit by boat. When the boat arrived in September, they had some surprising news. They learnt that for over 6 weeks, those of them who were English and French were now at war with the Germans. In those 6 weeks, all had been acting as friends, when according to their governments, they were enemies. So the fourth lesson we learn about stereotyping is that we can be highly influenced by authority figures, such as governments. Charles Ramirez-Berg, Professor of Media Studies at the University of Texas, described aspects of stereotyping in his book Latino Images in Film, Stereotypes, Subversion and Resistance. It was published in 2002, and he observes a number of positions in stereotyping, and I've made some observations as well on how these could be applied to the world of counselling and psychotherapy. So the first one is stereotypes are applied with rigid logic. For example, he's wearing a hooded top, so he must be a criminal. Stereotypes may have a basis in fact, so there may be some correlation between the stereotype and lived experience. The kernel of truth is an aspect addressed by psychologist Joshua Fishman. It was the kernel of truth that explained why numbers of people agreed on many stereotypes. And remember me talking about my wife's experience of hooded youths? It's amazing how one negative experience can get us to form a general opinion, a kernel of truth, in other words. Stereotypes are believed. Now, psychologist Gordon Allport theorised that an attitude towards a group is usually bonded to a belief about the group. And there are two aspects, attitude and belief. Of the two, attitude is harder to change because it cements belief. In other words, you may actually give someone the evidence to say, actually, that stereotype isn't true, but it's a lot harder to change their attitude towards the people who are in the stereotype. The fourth position is stereotypes are simplified generalizations. In other words, when we think in a stereotypical way, we flatten and simplify individuals. We deny them a sense of individual identity, which is totally opposite to what counselling and psychotherapy is about. 5. Stereotypes are ideological. Power and authority create stereotypes as a way of achieving dominance of their ideas. And let me ask you a question. Are all people claiming benefits feckless, lazy, work-shy individuals? No, they're not. But it serves power to label them as such. Sometimes, and the sixth position, the in-group stereotypes itself. So sometimes people could actually give themselves a stereotype, and I've selected here a few stereotypes: goths, emos, punks, townies, counsellors are groups which have a collective identity. And sometimes as therapists we meet clients who struggle to see themselves as individuals and break away from their self-imposed collective identities. The seventh position is the antidote to stereotyping is knowledge. The more educated you are, the less chance you will stereotype. And this is really true in the world of counselling and psychotherapy. If we're really interested in giving the best service to our clients, we must self-educate, not by asking them about their culture, sexuality or difference, but by undertaking our own research. And the reason I say that we shouldn't be asking our clients about the differences, they are there purely to get therapy and help. They're not there to educate us. We may learn something on the way from our clients. However, what we need to do is to make sure that any research we do or finding out information is done in our own time, and the client doesn't spend the time teaching you about them. And keeping in mind their culture, faith, position and gender or sexuality may have no impact on the way they feel or what's going on for them. So it's not unusual, as I'll go on to talk about, that sometimes it's easy to believe that because someone comes from a certain stereotype, that why wouldn't they feel this way? My last observation is best summed up in a short story about what can happen if someone relies on a stereotype as a basis of offering supportive services to clients. Many years ago, I was in a multidisciplinary meeting where a client was being discussed with his consent. The client's presentation was depression, and one of my colleagues pointed out that, well, he would be depressed, he's gay, and most gay men are depressed. Apart from not being very helpful, it highlighted how an individual could solely be seen in the stereotype and completely missed as the individual they are. A very apt, if uncomfortable, lesson to us all.
Thank you very much, Rory. Always insightful, and again, great, because stereotyping is something that comes up, I guess, under professional practice and consideration, and you're going to see it in your assignments. You are going to be writing about this. And it just reminds me, of a story many years ago in South Africa. I had a friend, his name was Angelo Morada. Angelo was Italian by birth. And his parents immigrated to South Africa when he was very young, and he was coming around for dinner. So I said to my wife, Colette, we must make pizza because he's Italian. And it was interesting. He doesn't like pizza. He was Italian, and that's stereotyping. He's Italian, so he must like pizza. It's like The Simpsons. Mamma mia, the tasty meatballs. Just look at The Simpsons, and boy, do you see the stereotypes used there. Very interesting.
Well, Ken, yeah, we have to be very careful of it, and it seeps in more than we think.
Yeah.
And what are you going to be covering in person-centered business today, Ken? I'm looking forward to this because you're going to tell us about being in the role of being a publisher, I believe.
Yes, small-time publisher, I guess. Well, it builds on what I discussed in episode 22 last week, where we're talking about that free introductory session that you might have, that taster session that you might give to a client. And at the end of that, they walk away and they have your documentation in your hand. And that may be your contract document. In fact, it should be your contract document in the terms of the service that you offer, how much you charge, but also maybe a brochure, something that is informative about what your practice is about. So that's what they leave with. But a brochure has many uses. It can be left in a medical center or in a public place where people may see it and wish to engage in a counseling service. So I'm going to be talking about brochures, what should be in a brochure, how it should be constructed, and how you can publish your very own brochure without spending a penny.
Person-centered business with Kenneth Kelly.
Today we're going to be looking at your brochure. Now, last week, if you go back and have a listen to the podcast, you're going to hear about maybe an introductory session or a free session that you might put up front for a client to come and test out what it is that you offer. And at the end of that session, they're going to go away with something in their hand. And that something will be your brochure, which kind of gives them an overview of who you are and what it is that you offer. And it's something that they have in writing. So that's one use for your brochure. But brochures can also be left at drop points. So that might be at a public library and places where the public might go in and they might see your service offering and think, wow, that's something that I'm looking to engage in, and pick it up from there. It may be a medical center that they go to. So looking at brochures, we're going to specifically look today at low-cost brochures. And the reason for that is printing is expensive. When you do go to printers, they usually want to make quite a few in a bulk run. So you can be looking at minimums of 500 to 1,000 to be able to get the costs down. And it doesn't make sense that as counselors, psychotherapists, we would be going through that many brochures. And also, if you change anything, you want to adjust a price maybe, or make a change, you have to start again and print brochures again. So I'm looking for a brochure that you would be able to print from a laptop, from a computer, from a Mac, using free templates. Now, the style of brochure I'm going to be covering today is what is called a tri-fold brochure. So a tri-fold brochure, you will have seen them. They're an A4 piece of paper, but it's folded in such a way that it opens up and gives you 6 panels. So it's narrow and long when you see it closed, and that's a tri-fold brochure. And the reason we're going to concentrate on that is because many drop points or places where you can put your brochure may have little brochure stands or a wall of brochures, and very often the size of the container is there. It takes a trifold because it's a very commonly printed brochure size. So the first thing that we're going to cover is that you have 6 pages on a trifold brochure. When it is opened up, it doesn't always look like 6 pages, and we'll get to that in a moment. But we're going to concentrate on, first of all, the front page. We're then going to be looking at the back page. Then we're going to be focusing on a page called the intro page. This is as you open up that front page and what that should say. And then we're going to look at the inside 3 columns, which kind of, when you have a trifold brochure opened up, kind of looks like one big spread. We're going to be having a talk about the printer configuration that you might need to set up to be able to print your brochures out, because it's called duplex printing. And it can be quite complicated and take a little bit of trial and error, but you can do this. So let's kick off by looking at that front page. Now, you need to get your message over loud and clear on that front page. And just a few podcast episodes ago, we were looking at defining what it is that we offer. So what is it we do, who is it for, and what is our unique selling proposition? And the front page of your brochure is a great place to put that on. As long as it's a short sentence, you want to be putting what your offer is. It needs to be plain to see that you are offering counselling as a service. So you may have your name on the front. It may say Joe Blogs Counsellor, or it may be your practice name. So for instance, with mine, it will say Warrington Counselling. You don't want to be too cluttered on your front page, and you certainly don't want to be giving too much information, just enough that they know what service that you offer, so they can see that they're basically looking to say, is this right for me? Is this something that I need? Is this something I want to learn more about? You do not want to be selling or going into depth of what it is that you offer on that front page. So keep it uncluttered. And you might want to go for a simple layout with a picture. Now, I've certainly got a download that you can download from the show notes of today's episode, where you can have a look and you can see what I use. But the feeling of the picture that you're looking for needs to represent the philosophy of what your practice is. So it may be a picture that gives a feeling of trust or peace or serenity or confidentiality, or it may be a therapeutic picture. So that's worth having a think about. And you can take up most of the front of your brochure just with your practice name, what it is you offer, and that picture. So just regarding colours, the kind of colours that you would want to be looking for a counselling or psychotherapy brochure are muted colours. What you wouldn't want is to use what are called warning colours, like bright yellow or bright red. We're psychologically primed that when we see those kind of colours, they mean warning. If you look at nature, if you look at a poison arrow frog, those are the colours you're going to see. If you look at a wasp, it has got those bright yellow stripes. So you want to be looking at muted colours that kind of impart a feeling of peace and serenity. The kind of colours to go for are pastel colours, or the more opaque colours, where you're using a desaturation of a certain colour. So on the front of your brochure, you can also have a picture of you. And the reason for this is because you're starting a relationship, you're starting a conversation. Now, maybe you gave them the brochure after a first session, then they know who you are and what you look like. But if they're picking your brochure up from a drop zone, from a wall, from a brochure pile in a public place, they don't know who you are. So by putting that picture of you on the front, you're starting that relationship. They can see who you are, and it gives them choice. They get to decide whether they feel that you look like somebody that they would choose to work with. You're not hiding away. You're putting yourself right out there and giving them that choice right up front. So on mine, they can very clearly see I am a man, and it may be that they choose not to work with a man, and that would kind of empower them to be able to make that decision right there and then. Now, the picture needs to be quite a considered picture. So what you don't want to be doing is just going through the pictures that you have, grabbing one where you look quite good and popping that on. You're looking for words like approachable, but not too overly friendly or false. So no big smile. I guess congruence is a great word there. And I would suggest I highly recommend that you go and speak to a professional photographer. It won't cost that much. And when you do speak to the photographer, give them the following brief. You want to be instructing them to take a picture of you that is not too formal. preferably not in a studio. A studio is a very false and set up setting where you've got a specific background and it looks like a studio shot. Outdoor shot with foliage in the background or a nondescript background outdoors gives you a more realistic and true picture. It's not to say that a well-taken studio shot won't work, but they can come across a little bit contrived. So you're looking for a natural and congruent and approachable photograph that you feel represents you. And you can almost show compassion and warmth within your facial expression without being overly happy and joyful, but at the same time not too stern and unapproachable. The next page I'm going to cover, that's your front page. Very little on it, but lots we can say about it. The next page we're going to cover is the back page, and we're not going to spend much time here. So this would be if they picked up that brochure and they completely turned it over, they did a 180 and turned that over, what would they see? And all you want on your back page are the contact details, how they can get in contact with you. That's it. No clutter. You could have, of course, your practice name there again. You may wish to fill the empty space with, again, a therapeutic picture to fill up that space. You may want to have a map that kind of shows your locality. If you're working within a certain town, it is maybe obvious to people if they look at a map of that town where you are, so you can put that on. But you want the contact details that you wish them to use when they get in contact with you. So that may be a number that you want them to call. It may be a website that you wish them to visit. It may be an email that you wish them to use, or it may be a combination of all of those. It may have the address of your practice on there as well. And that's all you want on that back page so that they can see it, recognize it as contact details from just a glance. They know where to go when they want to get in contact with you. So that's the front page, that's the back page done. So we open up that front page of a trifold brochure. We're looking now at the facing page. So if you think of a trifold brochure, when you open up that front page, you've got kind of a little flap. And that we're going to say as the intro page. And that intro page, I'm just going to refer you back to what do you do? Who do you do it for, and why should they care? So you're wanting to give them a brief snapshot, an overview of who you are, what you offer, where you offer it, any kind of specialisms that you may do, anything that makes you unique, such as your qualifications or the group that you work for. Do you do couples? Do you do young people and adolescents? Do you only do over 18? So you want to be looking at your modality. You want to be looking at your training and your level of competence, and you want to be crafting something there that kind of gives them a very brief overview of what you do. If they feel that connection and they want to go further, they're going to open up that little inside flap, that introduction page, and it's going to bring them to the spread page there. So which is kind of the 3-page spread that goes across. So the inside panels, as we call them, and this is where you get to go into a little bit more detail. And you might choose here to share things like, what is counselling? You know, we as counsellors, as psychotherapists, we spend years and years training and learning about counselling and psychotherapy. We know what it is, but somebody going in might not have that information. So it is respectful to let them know what counselling is, and of course what counselling is not, so that it kind of sets those expectations. What it is that you offer, you can go into a little bit more detail. Who you are, what your philosophy is, and of course what they can expect. So you might even go into as much detail as, should you choose to get in contact, I will offer you a free introductory session where we can get together and have a chat. So you can basically give them what they might expect. And of course, keep on referring to that back page where your contact details are, should they wish to get in contact with you. So that's a very brief overview. You have got an example in the show notes that you can download. You can have a look at that. And I've also put a few links in because there's some online tools that you can use. You click on them, you go through, and online you can actually build a trifold brochure, and you can print that out. You can print out as few as you like. You can print out 3 or 4 of them if you like. And if you ever need to make a change, you can just go back online and you can change that to suit where you're at the moment, change of details or anything like, change your price. Price is interesting. Should you put that on your brochure? I believe you should. I don't believe that. I believe you should put it right out there. But there you go. That's a personal thing. You'd have to think of what fitted for you. So I've got 2 links for you. One of them is office.com, which is Microsoft, and they have some great templates that you can use free. Don't have to be a user of their product. You can use it online. And the other one is layoutready.com, and it's free Word templates. So if you use MS Word, free Word templates for trifold brochures. So I just wanted to end off with speaking about printing. So the printing of the brochures can be quite frustrating because a trifold brochure is two-sided. And when you fold it up, it becomes one unit, I guess, or one brochure. But it can be quite confusing getting your printer to print it the right way round. So just spend a little bit of time and do some trial and error. We've got a little sticker on our printer which says which way up the letters the paper should go when you're putting it in. And it varies from printer to printer. But the words that you're looking are two-sided printing or duplex printing. Those are the kind of the words that they use in the settings menu. But best is just sit, play with it, trial, error. You will get it right. And I hope that these brochures will go out and they will introduce your service and your offering to clients who need you. And I hope that they will do well for you. And of course, as always, I hope that this has been useful for you.
This is one thing I always admire about my good friend Ken Kelly, his ability to save money and do it himself. and I was just sitting listening to that, Ken, and I'm thinking, I just wonder how much that would cost if you had to pay someone to do that.
Well, the truth of that, Rory, is when you're looking at printing, you're starting with 500-600 before you start. And if we're talking about a counselling practice or maybe a private practice in counselling, wow, that's a lot of brochures. You're going to sit with those in a box for a very long time. And I guess the drawback of that is if you have a change of telephone number or you want to change a detail or maybe a price on your brochure, you don't have the ability to do that. You've got to throw away all that you have. So it's so much easier to have it as a template on your computer and to just print them out as you need them.
Absolutely. It just felt like throwing away money, that Ken, when he's like throwing away pound notes.
And hopefully the brochure is going to be respectful in the hand of the client because it's going to inform them of your practice and give them more information so they can see and make an informed decision of whether that is a fit for them. So I guess it is, from an ethics perspective, a good document to hand over to somebody as well, if it's written correctly. So moving away from the person-centered business side of what we do as counsellors and psychotherapists and looking at being students again, Rory. And I remember having an assignment referred. And I remember that this assignment was referred because my referencing was not correct. And I couldn't get my head around it. I could see it. I could go on the internet and say Harvard referencing and it would tell me how to do it. But whenever I tried to do it, I always got in the wrong order or put the wrong information in. What can you tell us about referencing? Because I know it can bring up anxiety for some.
Oh, it can. And a lot of students say, I don't really understand why I need to reference the work because you know that I know it, Rory. I used to have that all the time. You know that I know it. And I say, okay, let's just talk a little bit about the history of why we reference academically. Well, the first thing that sometimes happens is that in academic work, you don't usually write from the first person. So you would say the author has identified or research would indicate. And the reason for that is that your paper is meant to be read out or published. So it might not be your paper gets read out or published, but academic work you should be able to hold up someone's assignment if it's being asked for without a personal view. So that's something we need to really get straight here. If you're studying, say, law, you would probably be asked to give a appraisal on something or an analysis, which wouldn't really have your view in it. And the idea is you hold that assignment up, someone can read it, and you could read it out to an audience. And that is why academic work is asked for in that kind of format. But also, people who are marking it need to know the validity of your research, because every piece of assignment should have a bit of research in it. You should be looking at either your books or counsellingtutor.com. See that? See how I did that, Ken? That merciless.
Yeah. But that's a great place to reference. And I know many learners do. I've seen assignments with counsellingtutor.com referenced on it.
In fact, I've got a copy of someone's master's degree with counsellingtutor.com on it, which we're very grateful of. So the idea is that I, as a tutor, can look at that and say, yes, that person has spent the time looking at the resources to give a view. It's not just about sitting in class and listening to the tutor. It's about your reading, your wider experience, and you can get research from anywhere. You can have it from a book, you can have it from a website, a journal, a newspaper, a podcast, a video. The list is endless, as long, and here's the key, as long as the person who's marking the assignment can get access to it. That's the key thing. So there's different forms of referencing. The most popular is Havard. Now, I've been teaching Havard referencing for years, and it was only when someone said to me one day in a conversation in the office at the college, do you know there's different forms of Havard referencing? I never knew that. And it can be a bit of a nightmare. There's different forms of Havard, there's APA, there's just huge amounts. So the lesson here is, it depends on your academic institution. Find out what your academic institution wants. And if it's a university, somewhere on their website, they will tell you exactly how to reference, what they want. They will have a policy on referencing. Now, if you're at a college, possibly they won't, or a private training provider, they might just say it needs to be in Havard. So if that's the case, me and Ken have got some real gold for you. We're going to give you a link in the show notes to a referencing generator by a university. And I use it all the time for my referencing for the documents that I produce for Counselling Tutor. And it's a Havard reference. It'll do virtually any source that you wish to think about where you want to put a reference in. But better than that, I'm going to give you a link to a barcode scanner where you can scan the book, the ISBN number of the book, which is the unique serial number, and it will literally reference it for you. How's that? How good's that?
That is great, great resources, because I'm mindful that referencing is also about crediting the person who maybe came up with the idea, who put the work in the beginning. So you're not claiming it as your own. You're saying, I'm able to bring this information in my assignment because of the work of Carl Rogers, say, for instance, and a book that he might have published. But I'm also mindful that many learners, and certainly our learners, Rory, that when we were teaching together, maybe don't come from an academic, that they don't follow the traditional academic route where they maybe leave school and then go to college and then go to university. It may well be that there's been many years, even decades, since they last studied. And all of a sudden, you've got this Havard referencing and this academic speak, and it's almost like a secret code. And if you don't have it in the right format, then it's wrong, and it's difficult to get your mind around that. So this is a great tool that takes all that pain out of it. And I know that we speak about this in Counselling Study Resource, and if you haven't seen Counselling Study Resource, Rory and I put together a resource for students of counselling and psychotherapy to help you and guide you while you undertake your studies. And there's a great book that you wrote, Rory, called Getting Your Assignment in Order, and that's a whole book on assignment tips, and it's available in the Counselling Study Resource if you are a member of that. But there's a whole section on Havard referencing in there as well, with links to those tools, so you can certainly pick that up as well. So show notes, episode 23 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast, you're going to find that those links that Rory has mentioned.
Absolutely. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of the Counselling Tutor Podcast with my good friend, the Scarlet Pimpernel, sat across the screen for me. So, as always, thinking about the beginning of the episode, stay grounded and definitely stay safe.
Yeah, for me, it feels a little dip into nostalgia today as we went from Duran Duran and shoulder pads to Apollo 13 right through to referencing. It's been really interesting looking at that lone working, looking at stereotypes. We've learnt a lot today about that. And of course, the brochure that you might give away to somebody as they leave your practice. And referencing, Havard referencing. It's been great. Take care. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.